The day before we actually flew to New York, in the room next door to my room at the MTC was one of my best friends growing up. And I remember I was terrified to go to New York. Like, I was just like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I don't know why I decided to do this. Like, what was I thinking? And I was just terrified, even though I had this desire my whole life. And I remember I ran into that friend, and she just hugged me and she's like, you know what? I know that you're going to do so good. I've known you my whole life. Like, the Lord is going to help you and you're just going to love it and you're going to have a lot of fun. And so that kind of helped me get through the night. And in the morning, I was just kind of shell shocked. I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? I was really, really nervous. And then I remember flying to New York. There was a group of about 6 of us on the airplane, and I remember all of us were from Utah or Arizona, just very deserty areas, and all of us were just amazed by how green everything was, and we were all just looking out the windows like, oh my gosh, it's all green, because it was beautiful. We flew over the forest, and we could just see all the green trees and the beautiful lakes, and I remember it was overcast that day, so everything was kind of had a darker shade to it, I guess, but it was beautiful. And I was still incredibly nervous. And when we got to the airport in Syracuse, New York, it was a really tiny airport. And I stepped out and I saw my mission president and his wife standing there right away. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's you. And they just like, I felt at home right away by them. I was still nervous. Like, I think everyone was nervous. But I just felt at home and loved with them right away. And a lot of my mission covered small towns. There were like 3 or 4 bigger areas, but generally speaking, it was like all country and all towns. And I'm a very, very city person. Like, so all I could picture was going to a place that looked like the scenery in Napoleon Dynamite. And I'm just like, I don't know if I can do this. And so that night, we slept over at the mission home, and I remember I got to sleep in the general authority bed because I was the tallest one in our group. I'm not even that tall, but where all the general authorities slept, I got to sleep in that bed. It was actually a huge blessing. But the next day, we entered into the chapel in Utica, and our mission president stood at the podium, and all the new missionaries stood on one side and the trainers stood on the other side. And one by one, he would call up a trainer and they would stand and they would say, so-and-so is serving in this area and their companion will be this. And then they would meet in the middle and sit in the middle section. And I remember he said, Sister Rasmussen is serving in Owego, and she stood up and he's like, and she'll be with Sister Stinson. And that was me. And so, we sat down in the middle and I said to her, I'm like, wait, what area are we serving in? And she says, Owego. And I actually have never been there and I've never heard anything about it. And I'm like, what? So I'm like, I don't think I learned about this in the MTC. I can't remember. And so it was about a 2-hour drive away from Utica. And automatically, I just loved my trainer. Like, we had a lot of similar interests. She was hilarious. And, you know, it's still awkward kind of getting to know you. We're going to be living with each other every day. But we just clicked right away. And I remember we drove through a lot of rural cows, land, and trees. And then we got to Owego, and I was amazed by how beautiful it was. Yes, it was a small town, but it was very, very condensed. So it was really, really busy. And it looked like someone had just scooped up a little street in London or Italy and just had plopped it in New York. Like, it was so cute. And I remember we were opening up the area for sisters. So there had been sisters 10 years earlier, so we were the first sisters in 10 years. And so we parked the car and we ran around this little, well, I shouldn't say, it was a little town, but it was incredibly busy. And so we're like running around trying to find where our apartment was. And we were above an antique store in this bright yellow and purple building. And, we were right on the banks of the Susquehanna River, which is where Joseph Smith got baptized, and automatically I just fell in love with this little town, loved the people in it, and all the houses were so colorful. I wanted to live there, and so I think that was my first impression of New York, was just how incredibly beautiful it was. Even though I wanted to serve in the city, I was still kind of in a little city, and I think the Lord knew that I needed to be there.